Hi everyone, welcome back to Clinical Psychology Community UK. I haven't posted a video for a little while, and as I am no longer an assistant psychologist, which is kind of terrifying to say, I thought I'd do a video kind of reflecting on my experiences and offering a bit of advice for anyone that is currently an assistant or is looking for an assistant role. Also ending my assistant psychologist journey after 4 years of applying for assistant roles and interviewing at least 50 times over all of that time. It's prompted me to do quite a lot of reflection, because becoming an AP was everything I wanted when I was, in uni, and when I left uni. It was absolutely my entire goal. So finally achieving that goal and then leaving, it's all a bit strange, and it kind of shifts your identity a little bit. It's all a bit odd. So let me start with some background. I became an assistant in February 2020, and I was successful in the interview in October 2019. So it took quite a lot of time with onboarding and things. But as we all know what happened in 2020, I was an assistant for 5 weeks before lockdown hit. So going into lockdown and working in my own house, when we just moved to a new city as well, for I think we were working from home for sort of 4 months before we ended up going back. So I didn't really know anyone. And that was quite stressful and quite difficult. And the role that I was in, there weren't other assistants within our service. There were kind of within the specialty, but not within our service. So it was quite isolating, really. It was a bit strange. The other thing to kind of give you a bit of background about, and I have spoken about this before, I started the role at complete burnout level from my previous job. And again, it's one of those things, I didn't really know I was in burnout until I started this job, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm tired of being compassionate. I'm tired physically and mentally, so exhausted. So I came into that AP role at burnout, and I think I'd psyched myself up because was offered it at in the October and started sort of 4 months later. So I'd had quite a long time to build up. Oh my God, what if you're not good enough? What if you don't know enough about psychology? It's been so long since you've worked in psychology and done literature reviews and used SPSS. And what if you're terrible? And that tiny little voice inside my head was like, you're going to be terrible at this, and everyone's going to know, and you're going to fail your probation, and it's going to happen. That imposter syndrome voice. I've done a video on imposter syndrome as well that I'll link somewhere around here. Walking into that AP role was difficult, and I actually made a rod for my own back. I wasn't being very kind to myself, and it was difficult. But ultimately, it's one of the favourite jobs that I've had. I think I've been given loads of great opportunities, and I've done some really good work that I'm genuinely really proud of, and learned a lot in this role. So I'm really, really happy that I've got an assistant role, and I think that's why assistant roles are kind of seen almost as like a golden ticket into the doctorate, because historically assistant roles were the ones that got all the clinical supervision and working alongside psychologists, actual real life psychologists, whereas other roles, didn't. Now we've got loads of other roles. PWPs might do. They might be, TAPs and CAPs. They might well get supervision with psychologists. Support workers could do. Healthcare assistants even, depending on the service. So there's a lot more opportunity now, and an assistant isn't necessarily the golden ticket. But if you are going for an assistant job, here's what I wish I had known beforehand. As I kind of alluded to, imposter syndrome is real. I thought there was something wrong with me. Right, because when I started my assistant job, I was finding it so difficult to understand the way services were kind of governed. Plus, I'd moved to Wales from England, and there's a different way that services are commissioned and run. There's something called the mental health measure, which is the mental health legislation in Wales, not the same thing as what we have in England. So there was a lot to get my head around. And because of the imposter syndrome, I didn't want to ask any questions, because I thought they would think that I don't know anything and that I'm an idiot, and that how did she get this job? Like, maybe we should sack her and not pass her probation. That was a real worry for me. And then it would spiral and spiral and spiral. And then if I didn't pass my probation, then I'd be sacked. And then how would I get another AP job and explain that I'd been sacked because I was rubbish? And then I would never get onto the doctorate. And then what would I do with my life? It's very stressful, really. Lots of spiraling. But the other thing that the imposter syndrome did was it suppressed my curious voice. Like the voice that I had in my head that wanted to ask questions, I suppressed that because I didn't want anyone to think I was an idiot. And it also made me really anxious to be around all the other assistants within our specialty, because it was so amazing. To me, walking into this, we had monthly assistant meetings, like peer kind of CPD meetings, which are fantastic. But I remember being massively intimidated by the knowledge and the way that the other assistants spoke. They already sounded like psychologists. And I didn't think that I had that vocabulary or that tone or that intonation yet. I just didn't. And the other thing that fed into my imposter syndrome was where my previous role in substance misuse, I was a team leader. So I was often, looked to make decisions and things like that. And I was offering supervision to people and training people and, inducting new staff and things like that. So when you go to an assistant job from that, which is a common experience, lots of people do that, to a junior unqualified role, it fed into that imposter syndrome, really, because I didn't quite know where I stood. I was used to kind of making decisions and things in my substance misuse role, and now I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to log into the system. I didn't know which system we used. I didn't know how to get access. And remember, we were in lockdown, right? So I didn't know how to access loads of these things or who to email, or it was tough. But that I internalized all of that. The other thing linked to imposter syndrome that I wish I'd known, like truly known, is that pretty much everyone else working in psychology has got imposter syndrome. Like, that's a fact. Pretty much everyone else has, right? So when I first had supervision with my clinical supervisor, who was like integral in getting me onto training, honestly, she's fantastic. And when I first had supervision with her, I just thought, oh my God, she's so knowledgeable. She's so inspirational. She knows so much stuff. She has such a great way of thinking and a completely different perspective to me, and a really curious way of looking at things. How will I ever get there? And then after a few months, when I kind of got to know my supervisor a bit more, I started talking about imposter syndrome, and she said, yeah, I feel that. And I was like, what do you mean you feel that you don't know what you're talking about? And she goes, yeah, I feel it all the time. And I'm like, what? Because in my head, she was so brilliant and knows so much stuff that it was infeasible to me that she could have a doubt about herself. Completely infeasible. Couldn't believe it. But having spoken to other psychologists kind of within the service and on social media and through YouTube and things, actually it's just such a common experience. And it's more about the system than us. What I wish I'd known is that it's completely acceptable for me to ask questions. You're an assistant. You are there to learn. Like, the beauty of an assistant role is that it's one of the only roles where they know that it's a temporary thing. They know that you are going for the doctorate. There's no awkwardness around that, because they know that that's the whole point in an assistant role. And the point is that it's okay to ask questions. And actually, that was a lesson I learned from one of the other assistants when we were in one of our CPD meetings. She would ask questions and say, sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat that? Can you explain it? And I thought that was so empowering, because I didn't feel I could do that. And she did. And I'm so grateful to her for that, because it kind of opened the door for me to be able to do that. You're not expected to know everything. You are a junior member of staff. You are expected to, have knowledge from your degree and things like that, and knowledge of the client group and some sort of awareness of yourself. But you're not expected to be a psychologist. You don't have, responsibility. You don't have clinical responsibility. So this is a great time to be kind of testing things out and developing who you are as a clinician. And that took me some time to understand and to get there, because I just thought I was on trial and everyone was going to find out that I wasn't good enough. So here is some advice for the next wave of assistant psychologists, whether you are an assistant now or whether you're looking to be an assistant in the next few years or coming up soon. The first thing is to be able to sit with uncertainty. That's my biggest lesson, I think. One of my biggest lessons from being an assistant is that life is really uncertain. And I think as well, with the decline process and me getting on from a reserve, it's a lot about managing uncertainty and kind of being able to deal with it. And one of my lessons was I like to be sure about everything. Always have, always will. I will always enjoy that. I'm a list person. I have lists for everything. I color code. I have folders. I love it all. But that's just not feasible. That's not real life. When you come to working in mental health, when you come to working in psychology or training, it's not feasible. sometimes you're not going to know. But being able to kind of sit with that uncertainty, be aware of that uncertainty and that discomfort that you get from that, and really thinking about, why am I feeling really anxious right now? What is that about? And then, just spending a bit of time with yourself thinking about it can be really helpful. And probably all of us have felt this, particularly with COVID, we don't really know, do we? So it's given us a lot of practice trying to kind of tolerate uncertainty. That's definitely something that you will need as an assistant, I think, or going through the decline process, because it's hard. Another piece of advice for new assistants, and this is a difficult one to word really, is to not put clinical psychologists on pedestals. It's really easy when you walk into clinical psychology, right? You leave your degree, or even you walk into your degree and they tell you that clinical psychology is too competitive and you'll never get in. That's a load of fun, isn't it? I'm sure lots of us have had that experience. But because we are primed to think about how impossible clinical psychology is, when we see clinical psychologists or trainees, or maybe even assistants, or anybody that's further along that journey than you are, it's really easy to put them on a pedestal and think, oh my God, they're perfect. They know everything. Like I kind of did with my supervisor. It's really easy to do that. But what happens when we put these people on pedestals sometimes is that it can be a bit of a challenge to that relationship. So we can be kind of guided by our admiration for that psychologist, our supervisor, rather than the reality of how they might be treating you or some of the things that they might be asking you to do. Because we're just thinking, yes, I'll do whatever you want me to do because you're going to help me get onto training. And yeah, I want every bit of experience. I'm so enthusiastic. Yeah, I'll work late. Yeah. Well, you can say whatever you want to me. It doesn't matter because you're ultimately a clinical psychologist and that's what I want. It's really easy to do that. And I actually had a pretty bad experience. It was really difficult because it's very difficult to quantify. It would be sort of lots of negative comments and rudeness, quite frankly, when it was just us two, but in front of everyone else it was all smiles and support. I know it's not an experience that only I have had with this person, but it's very difficult to quantify because there's no proof and it's just kind of like rudeness. But that was my experience, and it was someone very well established in the health board. I didn't realize until I left, and I sort of posted about it on an Instagram Q&A. Someone said, tell me about your supervision experiences, and I mentioned that a bad experience that I'd had. And some of the responses I had to that were, oh my God, how did you get through that? Are you all right? Like, that sounds awful. And I knew it was awful, but I think I just put it in a box in my head. And now I realize actually that's not okay. None of that stuff is okay. And I think part of the reason that it went on for so long is because I put that person on a pedestal going, I can just dismiss their bad behavior because they're going to help me. Now I'm out of it. I am happy that I had that experience, weirdly, because I know what sort of psychologist I want to be and how I want to supervise people. And it's not that. So yeah, I would say don't put people on pedestals and really try to assess the situation that you're in with some kind of drop of reality if you can. I know it's easier said than done because I wasn't able to do that until I kind of developed my reflective skills a little bit more, but that's definitely some advice that I would have for anyone that's working as an assistant or looking to in the future. My third bit of advice is that your supervisors generally are there to help you. Use your supervisors as a resource. Be honest with them about your anxieties, your goals, and your interests. Because if you do that, a good supervisor will help you kind of develop some of those things. One of my supervisors sat me down and said, right, what is it that you feel that you need for your next application to the doctorate? And I said, I've got quite a lot of clinical experience. I'm really looking for some research stuff, particularly within the NHS, like audits and things. And an audit was born, an audit was commissioned for me to do. So definitely be honest with them. As difficult as that is, just be honest, because that's, how are they supposed to help you? They can't read your mind. So you've got to tell them. Is there any additional training they could pay for? At one point, one of my supervisors mentioned that I could, maybe go and do a CBT course, or even a compassion focused therapy course, because that was something I was really interested in. COVID kind of got in the way of those things, but yeah. Also asking whether you can observe a psychologist working, whether you might be able to co-work a client with them, maybe sit in on an assessment or shadow them for the day just to see. you know, there are opportunities there, but you need to ask for them and really need to be aware of what the things are that you want and that you need so you can ask for them. And my final piece of advice to anyone pursuing a career in clinical psychology at all, assistants, PWPs, whatever, you are good enough. I really mean that, because firstly, you know, if you're an assistant, you got the job, okay? You beat 50 to 150 other people. That's huge. And actually, in terms of numbers, that's better than the doctorate. You know, like that's a lot of people. By applicants to place, 150 per one place. Nah, that's huge. So that's the first thing. But secondly, that voice telling you that you aren't good enough or that you should second guess everything is imposter syndrome, and it's lying to you. In the video that I'll link, I talk about some ways that you can kind of manage that imposter syndrome, whether it's going to be there all the time or not. But it's lying to you. That voice that's telling you you're not good enough is lying. And thirdly, take moments to acknowledge your achievements. For me, and I did post about this on Instagram, for me it was about the assistant psychologist name badge. When I got that name badge, I actually nearly cried, because it was so emotional for me. After years and years of trying to be an AP, I was finally an assistant, and that name badge just proved it. Nobody could take that away. Nobody. I'm still an assistant because I've got the badge. But really acknowledge your achievements, because that helps you build a picture of someone that is good enough. It's really, as we all teach our clients all the time, is about gratitude, making sure that you know that you are good enough. It's the system, not you. Like 15 to 18% of doctorate clinical psychology in the UK, doctorate applicants are successful. That doesn't mean that 15 to 18% are good enough. It means that there's not enough funding and that the system is broken. And because we are primed to be thinking clinical psychology is impossible, I'll never get in, we already are thinking, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be good enough. Because that's what we're told. But you are good enough. You are. So you can keep doing it and keep going, because you'll get there eventually. Trust me. I applied to the doctorate 6 times. You can do it. I believe in you. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for watching this one. My slight ramble about what it's like to be an assistant psychologist. Let me know what other videos you want to see down below in the comments, and I will link some other videos and some helpful stuff down there too. And make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.